Bueno, la CIM tiene una agenda enorme en el tema de democracia y de liderazgos. El primer ámbito tiene que ver con la gobernanza electoral, para que esta gobernanza electoral responda a las necesidades con las que fue creada, y es buscar los espacios de redistribución del poder. Después hay un programa interamericano sobre el liderazgo de las mujeres, donde generamos conocimiento y también tenemos cursos de capacitación. Hay un poderoso curso que ha llegado a más de 1000 mujeres con más de 15 ediciones, que es para candidatas electorales, en las cuales conversamos con ellas, pero también nos ponemos en una agenda de solidaridad y articulación y alianzas entre las mujeres, a pesar de las múltiples diferencias ideológicas o de partidos políticos. También hablamos de los temas de violencia política, porque no es lo mismo llegar que quedarse, y la violencia política es una forma de ejercicio de disciplinar a las mujeres para que vuelvan al mundo de lo privado y enfrentar la violencia, hacer buenas investigaciones, buenas leyes que permitan sancionar la violencia política. Es parte de las aspiraciones de la CIM en este programa de liderazgo de las mujeres. La aspiración histórica de las mujeres es estar en el mundo de lo público, que nuestro trabajo sea remunerado y que tenga un reconocimiento. COVID ha puesto en evidencia una profundización de las brechas existentes para el logro de este objetivo. Estas brechas existentes ahora dan cuenta de que podríamos tener un rezago de más de 2 décadas en el mundo laboral, que el cierre de brechas que se previó que podía tardar 100 años en cerrarse, ahora se habla de 135 años para cerrar la brecha entre los hombres y las mujeres. Entonces nuestro objetivo es que miren el derecho de las mujeres al empoderamiento económico, que el statement "quédate en casa", que es un viejo conocido del patriarcado, no sea que nos quedemos en casa siempre, y que entendamos que la inserción de la mitad de la población, de este talento humano que tiene una serie de ventajas competitivas, es necesario para el crecimiento económico. De manera que la CIM está colocando esta realidad, está colocando las necesidades de las mujeres y está haciendo unas recomendaciones de rutas para poder cumplir con el derecho al empoderamiento económico y con el crecimiento económico que requieren nuestras empobrecidas economías en tiempos de COVID.
Hoy, esta organización es el guardián regional en defensa de la democracia, la libertad y los derechos humanos. Los países se han comprometido con estos valores a través de instrumentos legales como la Carta Democrática Interamericana, la Convención Americana de Derechos Humanos y todas las demás convenciones interamericanas. Nuestro trabajo es mantener los más altos estándares. Debemos ser objetivos, analizar los hechos, denunciar cuando veamos corrupción, inequidad o amenazas a la libertad. En esos casos no podemos ser neutrales.
than 100 years since the inauguration of this building, the OAS headquarters, our institution still brings together the peoples of the Americas to address our responsibilities as a partnership of nations. As we look to the future, our work must also focus on the construction of a positive agenda that continues to favorably impact millions of lives every day.
The COVID-19 pandemic brought unprecedented challenges to our member states and the people we serve. In response, the OAS Secretariat for Integral Development adopted a three-pronged approach by 1. Adjusting our portfolio of existing projects, 2. Exploring new projects to meet emerging needs, and 3. Expanding multi-sectoral partnerships. The results achieved in 2020 demonstrate the resilience of our member states and the commitment of the OAS SETI to work with member states and partners towards our common goals in the development of our region. Our Network on Competitiveness launched the COVID-19 Ideas Accelerator, sharing 250 tools, health solutions, responses, and recovery plans. The Network for Labor Administration published a portfolio of responses from ministries of labor to COVID-19, sharing over 420 measures taken to protect workers, employment, and income. Likewise, The Inter-American Teacher Education Network series, Teaching STEM in Quarantine, provided 117,000 teachers with key tools to continue advancing STEM education during the pandemic. Through its network and platforms, the Inter-American Committee on Ports promoted international and national best practices, guidelines, protocols, and recommendations on COVID-19 safety measures and continuity of logistic operations. Initiatives such as the Education in Times of Change platform allowed us to meet urgent needs by offering timely tools on virtual education and a dedicated space for ministries to share strategies, actions, and solutions. Other programs such as the Row Fund stepped up, providing emergency grants to offset the challenges imposed on our students by the pandemic. SETI's partnerships are adding value to member states in the form of technical assistance, training, and access to tools and services. In partnership with leading private sector institutions, we offered micro, small, and medium enterprises access to online tools and training, increasing their visibility and participation in e-commerce, a key to their survival and growth in the pandemic and post-pandemic era. A new OAS SETI Facebook initiative provided 85,000 MSMEs across the region with capacity building opportunities and WhatsApp business tools to aid response, recovery, and resilience building. The Caribbean Small Business Development Centers program achieved real impact, supporting new businesses, expanding sales, and driving growth. A new network of Caribbean SPDCs will broaden the program's reach. The Inter-American Committee on Tourism, the C2, convened ministerial-level policy dialogue in an urgent response to the impact of the pandemic on the hard-hit tourism and hospitality sectors. Policymakers and experts discussed biosanitary protocols, travel and visa facilitation, among other critical areas for the sector's recovery. Partnering with the George Washington University and the U.S. Bureau of Indian Affairs, we went ahead with the scheduled first Indigenous Tourism Forum of the Americas, pivoting to a virtual format and convening over 240 participants from indigenous communities, the private sector, and governments. SETI also integrated sustainable development practices in the COVID-19 response. The pandemic is a daily reminder of the links between water, health, sanitation, food security, and nutrition. We ensured the continuity of our water management projects in the Plata Basin and worked with governments and partners in the design of an investment portfolio valued at $90 million. Additionally, the Energy and Climate Partnership of the Americas continued to share relevant best practices and responses to the pandemic on energy and air quality. These few examples indicate our collective impact. We cannot do this alone. It is now more urgent than ever to address the region's structural weaknesses, to recover from the health, economic, and social crises occasioned by the pandemic and prepare for future shocks. It is imperative that we work together as we risk losing recent development gains and seeing millions fall back into poverty. It is time for the region to redirect course and pursue a more sustainable, resilient, and equitable future for all. We are in this together.
But the resilience building agenda is too big for any one stakeholder to address acting alone, and simply bringing together stakeholders, whether at the national, subnational, regional, or global level, is not enough. Effective, focused, and sustained coordination among stakeholders is paramount to provide countries with integrated and comprehensive support.
The OAS, as a hemispheric forum and honest broker, must continue to facilitate this process while we work with member states towards the attainment of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. Cooperation, collaboration, and partnerships that include all actors strengthen us, enabling us to be more than the sum of our parts. We can and we must work together. The future of our region depends on it.
tiene una serie de ventajas competitivas, es necesario para el crecimiento económico. De manera que la CIM está colocando esta realidad, está colocando las necesidades de las mujeres y está haciendo unas recomendaciones de rutas para poder cumplir con el derecho al empoderamiento económico y con el crecimiento económico que requieren nuestras empobrecidas economías en tiempos de COVID.
Hoy, esta organización es el guardián regional en defensa de la democracia, la libertad y los derechos humanos. Los países se han comprometido con estos valores a través de instrumentos legales como la Carta Democrática Interamericana, la Convención Americana de Derechos Humanos y todas las demás convenciones interamericanas. Nuestro trabajo es mantener los más altos estándares. Debemos ser objetivos, analizar los hechos, denunciar cuando veamos corrupción, inequidad o amenazas a la libertad. En esos casos no podemos ser neutrales.
More than 100 years since the inauguration of this building, the OAS headquarters, our institution still brings together the peoples of the Americas to address our responsibilities as a partnership of nations. As we look to the future, our work must also focus on the construction of a positive agenda that continues to favorably impact millions of lives every day.
The COVID-19 pandemic brought unprecedented challenges to our member states and the people we serve. In response, the OAS Secretariat for Integral Development adopted a three-pronged approach by 1. Adjusting our portfolio of existing projects, 2. Exploring new projects to meet emerging needs, and 3. Expanding multi-sectoral partnerships. The results achieved in 2020 demonstrate the resilience of our member states and the commitment of the OAS SETI to work with member states and partners towards our common goals in the development of our region. Our Network on Competitiveness launched the COVID-19 Ideas Accelerator, sharing 250 tools, health solutions, responses, and recovery plans. The Network for Labor Administration published a portfolio of responses from ministries of labor to COVID-19, sharing over 420 measures taken to protect workers, employment, and income. Likewise, the Inter-American Teacher Education Network series, Teaching STEM in Quarantine, provided 117,000 teachers with key tools to continue advancing STEM education during the pandemic. Through its network and platforms, the Inter-American Committee on Ports promoted international and national best practices, guidelines, protocols, and recommendations on COVID-19 safety measures and continuity of logistic operations. Initiatives such as the Education in Times of Change platform allowed us to meet urgent needs by offering timely tools on virtual education and a dedicated space for ministries to share strategies, actions, and solutions. Other programs such as the Row Fund stepped up, providing emergency grants to offset the challenges imposed on our students by the pandemic. SETI's partnerships are adding value to member states in the form of technical assistance, training, and access to tools and services. In partnership with leading private sector institutions, we offered micro, small, and medium enterprises access to online tools and training, increasing their visibility and participation in e-commerce, a key to their survival and growth in the pandemic and post-pandemic era. A new OAS SETI Facebook initiative provided 85,000 MSMEs across the region with capacity building opportunities and WhatsApp business tools to aid response, recovery, and resilience building. The Caribbean Small Business Development Centers program achieved real impact, supporting new businesses, expanding sales, and driving growth. A new network of Caribbean SPDCs will broaden the program's reach. The Inter-American Committee on Tourism, the C2, convened ministerial-level policy dialogue in an urgent response to the impact of the pandemic on the hard-hit tourism and hospitality sectors. Policymakers and experts discussed biosanitary protocols, travel and visa facilitation, among other critical areas for the sector's recovery. Partnering with the George Washington University and the U.S. Bureau of Indian Affairs, we went ahead with the scheduled first Indigenous Tourism Forum of the Americas, pivoting to a virtual format and convening over 240 participants from indigenous communities, the private sector, and governments. SETI also integrated sustainable development practices in the COVID-19 response. The pandemic is a daily reminder of the links between water, health, sanitation, food security, and nutrition. We ensured the continuity of our water management projects in the Plata Basin and worked with governments and partners in the design of an investment portfolio valued at $90 million. Additionally, the Energy and Climate Partnership of the Americas continued to share relevant best practices and responses to the pandemic on energy and air quality. These few examples indicate our collective impact. We cannot do this alone. It is now more urgent than ever to address the region's structural weaknesses, to recover from the health, economic, and social crises occasioned by the pandemic and prepare for future shocks. It is imperative that we work together as we risk losing recent development gains and seeing millions fall back into poverty. It is time for the region to redirect course and pursue a more sustainable, resilient, and equitable future for all. We are in this together.
But the resilience building agenda is too big for any one stakeholder to address acting alone, and simply bringing together stakeholders, whether at the national, subnational, regional, or global level, is not enough. Effective, focused, and sustained coordination among stakeholders is paramount to provide countries with integrated and comprehensive support.
The OAS, as a hemispheric forum and honest broker, must continue to facilitate this process while we work with member states towards the attainment of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. Cooperation, collaboration, and partnerships that include all actors strengthen us, enabling us to be more than the sum of our parts. We can and we must work together. The future of our region depends on it.
Bueno, la CIM tiene una agenda enorme en el tema de democracia y de liderazgos. El primer ámbito tiene que ver con la gobernanza electoral, para que esta gobernanza electoral responda a las necesidades con las que fue creada, y es buscar los espacios de redistribución del poder. Después hay un programa interamericano sobre liderazgo de las mujeres, donde generamos conocimiento y también tenemos cursos de capacitación. Hay un poderoso curso que ha llegado a más de 1000 mujeres con más de 15 ediciones, que es para candidatas electorales, en las cuales conversamos con ellas, pero también nos ponemos en una agenda de solidaridad y articulación y alianzas entre las mujeres, a pesar de las múltiples diferencias ideológicas o de partidos políticos. También hablamos de los temas de violencia política, porque no es lo mismo llegar que quedarse, y la violencia política es una forma de ejercicio de disciplinar a las mujeres para que vuelvan al mundo de lo privado y enfrentar la violencia, hacer buenas investigaciones, buenas leyes que permitan sancionar la violencia política. Es parte de las aspiraciones de la CIM en este programa de liderazgo de las mujeres. La aspiración histórica de las mujeres es estar en el mundo de lo público, que nuestro trabajo sea remunerado y que tenga un reconocimiento. COVID ha puesto en evidencia una profundización de las brechas existentes para el logro de este objetivo. Estas brechas existentes ahora dan cuenta de que podríamos tener un rezago de más de 2 décadas en el mundo laboral, que el cierre de brechas que se previó que podía tardar 100 años en cerrarse, ahora se habla de 135 años para cerrar la brecha entre los hombres y las mujeres. Entonces nuestro objetivo es que miren el derecho de las mujeres al empoderamiento económico, que el statement quédate en casa, que es un viejo conocido del patriarcado, no sea que nos quedemos en casa siempre, y que entendamos que la inserción de la mitad de la población, de este talento humano que tiene una serie de ventajas competitivas, es necesario para el crecimiento económico. De manera que la CIM está colocando esta realidad, está colocando las necesidades de las mujeres y está haciendo unas recomendaciones de rutas para poder cumplir con el derecho al empoderamiento económico y con el crecimiento económico que requieren nuestras empobrecidas economías en tiempos de COVID.
Esta organización es el guardián regional en defensa de la democracia, la libertad y los derechos humanos. Los países se han comprometido con estos valores a través de instrumentos legales como la Carta Democrática Interamericana, la Convención Americana de Derechos Humanos y todas las demás convenciones interamericanas. Nuestro trabajo es mantener los más altos estándares. Debemos ser objetivos, analizar los hechos, denunciar cuando veamos corrupción, inequidad o amenazas a la libertad. En esos casos no podemos ser neutrales.
more than 100 years since the inauguration of this building, the OAS headquarters, our institution still brings together the peoples of the Americas to address our responsibilities as a partnership of nations. As we look to the future, our work must also focus on the construction of a positive agenda that continues to favorably impact millions of lives every day.
Solicitamos a las delegaciones, por favor, que se acerquen a sus lugares para que iniciemos nuestra sesión esta mañana. Mr. Chairman, with your permission, we will confirm the quorum. Muy buenos días a todas y todos. Vamos a iniciar esta mañana con la confirmación del quórum.
Morning, everyone. We'll start with confirming the quorum.
Out of headquarters and here in the Hall of the Americas. Connected outside and here in the hall, we have the following delegations: Antigua and Barbuda, Argentina, Belize, Bolivia, Brazil, Canada, Chile, Costa Rica, Dominica, Ecuador, El Salvador, the United States of America, Grenada, Guatemala, Haiti, Honduras, Jamaica, Mexico, Panama, the Dominican Republic, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Suriname, Trinidad and Tobago, and Uruguay. We have quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning, distinguished colleagues. I'm pleased to declare open this regular meeting of the Permanent Council. And you all have received the order of business in document CP/OD 2405/22, and we have a request to change the order of business. Especially, we have 12 items on the agenda for today, so we have some work to do. There was a request to change agenda number 8 and 9 and refers those two. So we will first now have the commemoration of the International Day of Persons with Disabilities, and after that the reading of the Declaration on the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. If there are no observations further, I will adopt the order of business with this one amendment. Thank you. Before proceeding to the next item on the order of business, allow me on behalf of the Permanent Council to congratulate the peoples and governments of Suriname and Barbados on the celebration of their national days on the 25th of November and the 30th of November, respectively. We extend our condolences and solidarity to the peoples and government of Colombia for the loss of multiple lives following the torrential rains and mudslides which washed away roads in that country during the rainy season that has been taking place since the year 2020. We also express our deepest regret for the sensitive death of the former member and former president of the Inter-American Judicial Committee, the prominent Chilean jurist Eduardo Fio Grossi, on December the 3rd, and convey our deepest condolences to his family, colleagues, and friends for such a painful and irreparable loss. We will now proceed to the next item on the order of business, which is the presentation of the report of the Electoral Observation Mission in Mexico. This agenda item was requested by the Secretary General through note CP/INF 9524/22. The Chair has been informed that in a letter to the Secretary General of the OAS dated October 7, 2020, the National Electoral Institute invited the OAS to observe the federal and local elections of June 6, 2021. This was the fifth occasion on which the OAS observed an electoral process in Mexico. In response to that request, the OAS Secretary General appointed the Argentinian lawyer Santiago Canton as Chief of Mission. Mr. Canton is currently Senior Fellow of the Peter D. Bell Rule of Law Program of the Inter-American Dialogue. Previously, he served as Director of the Peter Bell Rule of Law Program of the Inter-American Dialogue and as Executive Secretary and Rapporteur for Freedom of Expression of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, among many distinguished high-level positions. The final report of the OAS mission to the June 2021 federal and local elections in Mexico has also been circulated to all missions as document CP/Doc 5832/22. On behalf of the Permanent Council, I extend a cordial welcome to Dr. Santiago Canton, Chief of the Electoral Mission in Mexico, who is joining this meeting from Argentina. Dr. Canton, you have the floor, sir.
Buenos días.
Good morning. Ambassador Jan Martin William Schalweg, Chair of the Permanent Council and Permanent Representative of Suriname to the OAS. Ambassador Luz Elena Baños, Permanent Representative of Mexico to the OAS. Luis Almagro, OAS Secretary General. Nestor Mendez, Assistant Secretary General. On June 6, 2021, Mexico held the largest elections in its history. Over 93 million people were called to the polls to elect more than 21,300 officials. At this time, the OAS deployed a mission of 36 people that observed issues related to electoral organization and technology, as well as political financing, political participation of women, indigenous peoples and Afro descendants, electoral justice, voting abroad, electoral violence, as well as access to the media and freedom of expression. This election demonstrated the institutional strength and professionalism of the autonomous and independent electoral authorities who successfully carried out the process. Even in the context of a pandemic, the mission observed that despite isolated incidents of violence, the day passed relatively normally, and that in spite of the large number of positions in dispute, on election night, citizens had access to the preliminary and quick count of the election results. In that regard, the reports of this mission make recommendations that point to changes in specific matters, considering that the Mexican electoral system does not require deep reforms to continue guaranteeing the full exercise of suffrage. To make the best use of our time today, I will briefly speak to some of the mission's findings and recommendations. The full report has already been distributed to the missions and can be consulted on the webpage of DECO. Inclusion measures. The mission observed important advances in the area of inclusion, with affirmative actions for women, migrants, indigenous and Afro-descendant peoples, persons with disabilities, and persons of sexual diversity, among others. The mission welcomes these measures that seek to guarantee the full, free political participation of all Mexicans. However, the mission observed some challenges in their implementation and therefore recommends establishing effective sanctions for political parties and coalitions when the competent authorities prove the existence of cases of fraud or simulation of indigenous identity. 2, evaluate the possibility of extending voting to all residents abroad for the Chamber of Deputies of the Congress of the Union. Political participation of women. Mexico has one of the most advanced regulatory frameworks in the world in terms of women's political rights and gender equality. The mission recognizes the adoption of laws to combat gender-based political violence and the extension of the principle of parity to all organs and branches of government. These measures have significantly increased women's participation in political spaces. The initiative of the election authorities to extend this principle to governorships allowed for the election of a historic number of women governors. In order to continue advancing with the full political participation of women, the mission recommends the following. 1, promote a legislative reform that establishes parity for governorships and municipal presidencies. 2, make the necessary modifications so that gender-based political violence within political parties is addressed with due diligence, and to guarantee the possibility of filing complaints with guarantees of impartiality and independence. In terms of political electoral financing, the 2014 electoral reform concentrated on the technical auditing unit of the National Electoral Institute, INE, the function of inspecting the income and expenses of all federal and local election campaigns. The activity of inspecting campaign accounts is a challenge of great magnitude, not only because of the sheer number of federal and local candidacies in the elections, but also because of the legal deadlines of just 10 days after the submission of reports by organizations. Here, the mission recommends the following. Evaluate the extension of deadlines to carry out the reviews corresponding to the electoral campaign reports submitted by the parties. And 2, delegate the responsibility of auditing local candidacies to the local public bodies, which, if applicable, should have the necessary technical and operational capacity to carry out such work. Political electoral violence. The main threat to the electoral process has been the high levels of violence. According to government information, between March 4 and May 21, 2021, there were 13 homicides, 101 assaults, and 187 threats to candidates that were recorded. It should be noted that these figures do not capture desistance from participation due to fear. Likewise, the mission learned with concern that there were attacks and murders of members of the press. The Secretariat of Security and Citizen Protection in March 2021 implemented a new initiative to combat electoral violence. This was the first election in which the federal government had a strategy for protecting candidates. The mission believes that the initiative is moving in the right direction by seeking to coordinate federal, state, and municipal governments as part of a policy of prevention, protection, and judicial investigation of political violence. The levels of violence recorded during the 2021 election process in Mexico make it one of the most violent election cycles in the recent history of the region. Violence was directed at all political parties. Some of them expressed to the mission their concern about the context in which the election took place and denounced the involvement of organized crime. The mission expresses its deep concern over the direct and serious impact of political electoral violence on the electoral process in Mexico. It constitutes a direct attack on the democratic system. We reiterate the need to take immediate action so that the next electoral processes are carried out free of electoral violence. The mission agrees with the decision of the Electoral Tribunal of the Judiciary of the Federation regarding the need to create a national electoral policy to prevent violence. The mission recommends establishing a specific regulatory framework with protocols to address various types of political electoral violence before, during, and after the electoral process, taking into account gender and ethnic differential approaches. 2, activating interinstitutional mechanisms for risk assessment, early warnings, and granting protection measures, at least starting from the beginning of the electoral period. 2 or 3, intensifying measures to prevent violence against journalists, in line with international standards and taking into account the specific risks they face. Lastly, ensuring a judicial investigation and clarification of events of electoral violence. Electoral institutionality and autonomy of the electoral institutions. The mission witnessed a climate of political tension and confrontational and polarizing rhetoric, which included questioning of electoral institutions. The OAS mission observed that high-ranking public officials sought to discredit the decisions of the electoral authorities, and in some cases, they called for them to be dismissed and encouraged violent behavior. The mission reiterates that electoral processes should be conducted in an environment free of pressure on the authorities that are responsible for the electoral process. Therefore, it recommends that all political actors conduct themselves responsibly and channel their complaints, particularly those related to possible irregularities, in an institutional manner through the channels established by Mexican law. The mission is grateful for the cooperation provided by the National Electoral Institute, the Electoral Tribunal of the Judiciary of the Federation, the Special Prosecutor's Office for Electoral Crimes, as well as other local election institutions which allowed the mission to carry out its work. It also extends its gratitude to the government of Mexico, especially to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for its cooperation. The mission is also grateful for the financial contributions of the governments of Canada, Spain, the United States, France, Italy, the Netherlands, Peru, and the Dominican Republic, which made it possible to deploy the mission. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Santiago Canton, for your presentation. I think that these observation missions are very important for every country and also for the OAS. And at the request of the delegation of Mexico, I'm now pleased to offer the floor to Senor Manuel Carrillo Poblano. He is coordinator de Asuntos Internacionales del Instituto Nacional Electoral in Mexico. Sir, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Much, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for the support from Ambassador Banos, the permanent representative of Mexico to the OAS. I am attending this event as a representative of the National Electoral Institute of Mexico, and I am representing the director of that institution, Dr. Cordoba. He has asked me to extend to all of you very warm greetings and expresses his thanks for the final report of the mission on the federal and local elections that were held in Mexico. The report that was prepared by the OAS mission regarding the elections from 6 June 2021. Chair, Secretary General of the OAS, Luis Almagro, distinguished members of this Permanent Council. We have a serious, rigorous, critical, and constructive report before us. Starting in 2009, the OAS has carried out 5 electoral missions in Mexico. And throughout all of these missions, the reports produced have been characterized by their objectivity in terms of findings and accountability in terms of issuing recommendations. Electoral democracy in Mexico has been enriched by yet another report. It has listed recommendations that the director of the INE, as well as other colleagues at the Institute, will analyze in light of our political culture and context. During this time, when democracy in the world is facing complex issues and questioning about how it functions, luckily in the Americas, we have an institution, organization that focuses on promoting electoral democracy in the hemisphere, and that is the OAS. With international organizations, we have seen support for our democratic processes in Mexico. The OAS has held hemispheric level meetings so that we can reflect upon and analyze issues that affect electoral democracy and the various paths that we can take to find viable solutions. At the same time, work has been done to hold courses, workshops, and best practices about how to hold elections during a pandemic and other issues such as gender-based political violence, fake news, among many others. Electoral authorities and bodies in the region are here to support electoral democracy. Secretary General, members of the Permanent Council, we need these electoral missions and the principles that they guarantee. They contribute to the legitimacy of political representation. The INE in Mexico is an autonomous entity. It is autonomous, impartial, and works to ensure political suffrage, as you can see in the report. We are very open to international bodies observing our work. We have recognized electoral observation for many years. We have been able to receive thousands of visitors from many countries from 5 continents. We welcome the different recommendations that have been made by various international missions. Several reports have attested to the integrity of the electoral process in Mexico. The INE, as an independent body, has been able to address positions that were under dispute, such as the presidency, seats in the Congress, city councils, governorships, among others. Political changeover has been seen as there are different political parties that come into our system. Our systems have come out of a long series of political reforms that began many years ago and that have been completed recently. And various political forces have worked to achieve this. In our reform processes, we have seen democracy prevail as an ideal, and we have adapted it to our political realities. reforms cannot last unless we have ethics, and our results attest to that. In Mexico, the issue of electoral democracy goes back all the way to our revolution in the 1800s. Our slogan at the time was to have legitimate suffrage. We have received other reports from international missions, and this shows us the path and how we can evolve, achieve milestones, and ensure the quality of our system. As the OAS report shows, the idea here is to strengthen democracy in Mexico. And I will conclude by stating that we had one of our greatest presidents, Benito Juarez, who said that democracy is the destiny of mankind. Freedom is its indestructible weapon, and it is also the means to the end that we seek to achieve. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Senor Manuel Carrillo Poblano, for this reply, and I must say I listened with great interest, and I stress that these observation missions are very important for each country. We learn from it, and we thank also the countries that have supported it. I open the floor to delegations that wish to refer to this item on the agenda now. And I see Mexico. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Mr. Chair, my delegation took due note of the presentation of the final report of the foreign visitors of the OAS that were present during the local elections in the 21st of June, with the invitation received from the General Secretariat of the OAS by the Electoral Institute in Mexico, based on the framework agreement established between Mexico in 2016 with the OAS. The report that was presented today was presented also to the Mexican authorities on the 4th of November last, and we took due notice of all its content, including the findings and technical recommendations in order to carry out organization and electoral technology, political participation of women, indigenous and Afro-descendants, as well as foreigners, electoral justice, electoral financing, freedom of expression, means, networks, and security for all electoral processes. The Mexican government will pay due attention to all these matters, as well as the OAS General Secretary, to follow up the technical recommendations that were stated in this report that will help to strengthen the institutional strength of Mexico. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The Ambassador of Canada.
Thank you very much, Chair, and it's a pleasure to see you and colleagues this morning. Let me start by thanking both Dr. Canton and the representative from the National Electoral Institute, Dr. Canton, for the comprehensive report of the mission and also for the comments that we heard this morning as well. We're honored to have been able to contribute to this mission, but I think most importantly, we'd like to congratulate Mexican citizens on their participation in exercising their rights in this democratic electoral process. We also congratulate Mexican electoral authorities for their professionalism in which they conducted the largest elections in Mexico's history, particularly in the context of the pandemic. Canada also welcomes the implementation of affirmative action measures in Mexico aimed at broadening the exercise of political rights, including the adoption of legislation to combat gender-based political violence, as well as efforts to enhance the political participation of Indigenous peoples, Afro-Mexicans, people with disabilities, LGBTI persons, and migrants as well. I'll continue with a couple of closing comments in French, Mr. Chair. Toutefois, nous tenons à exprimer notre plus vive inquiétude face aux nombreux
We express concern over violence that we have seen.
Aux élections et n'ont pas leur place dans les sociétés démocratiques. Le Canada accueille favorablement les conclusions et les recommandations de la mission et est convaincu que le Mexique continuera de collaborer avec l'OEA et d'autres partenaires à la mise en œuvre, contribuant ainsi au renforcement des institutions démocratiques. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Ambassador of Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The United States takes the floor just to briefly thank Dr. Canton for his presentation this morning, and of course to emphasize the U.S. support for the important work that the OAS Department of Electoral Cooperation and Observation does as one of the most vital functions of this institution. Preserving the integrity and independence of democratic institutions is essential as we continue to promote free and fair elections throughout our region, and we look forward to following through on our regional efforts in this regard moving forward. Once again, we greatly appreciate the important work and commitment of the work of the OAS generally in this area and of DECO in particular. Thank you.
Thank you, United States. I don't know if Dr. Santiago Canton wants to give a short reply. Otherwise, we will continue. No? Okay. If there are no further observations, the chair suggests that the Permanent Council take note of the presentation of Dr. Santiago Canton of the final report of the OAS mission to the June 2021 federal and local elections in Mexico, as well as the comments expressed by Mr. Manuel Carrillo Poblano and comments by other delegations. There being no objections, it is so agreed. Then I continue with item 3 on the order of business, and that is about the election of officers of the Committee on Administrative and Budgetary Affairs, CAP, and the Committee on Judicial and Political Affairs, CAJP. For the position of chair of the CAP, we have received the candidacy of Ambassador Chet Namor, permanent representative of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, reflected in document CP/INF 9534/22. I offer the floor to delegations. I recognize the Ambassador Sanders of Antigua and Barbuda. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, but I'm going to be brief in the comments that I'm going to make now. It is simply to say that CARICOM countries, those who have indicated their support for the nomination of Ambassador Chet Namor of the Bahamas to chair the CAP, is for a position firmly held. We believe that Ambassador Namor possesses all of the qualities and the experience and skills necessary to guide the activities of CAP on behalf of all member states. We are very pleased to recommend him for this position, and we hope, Mr. Chair, that we can shorten this entire process by agreeing to welcome his appointment by acclamation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. The suggestion was by acclamation. Is there support for that? We have all heard the applause from the members of the Council here in the Hall of the Americas, and having received no objections from the members participating in a virtual format, the Chair registers that the Permanent Council has elected Ambassador Chet Namor, Permanent Representative of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, as Chair of the CAP. I think this will go in 1st of January. Congratulations to the new chair, and good luck with this enormous responsibility. For the next item, the candidacy of the chair of the CAJP, we have received the candidacy of Ambassador Hugh Adsett, Permanent Representative of Canada, and that was reflected in document CP/INF 9529/22. I offer the floor to delegations, and I see that the delegation of Mexico has requested the floor. You have the floor, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. The delegation of Mexico feels honored to present the candidacy of the very distinguished Ambassador Hugh Adsett, the permanent representative of Canada, to preside the Commission of Juridical and Political Affairs during the period 2022-2023. As the delegation will remember, Ambassador Adsett presented his credentials in October 19 and received the budgetary session during the period 21, showing in the leadership exercise, the capacity of negotiating, etc. As a lawyer in his profession in Canada, he has contributed in many different positions as the Canadian Embassy in Ethiopia, the UN, and has been the General Director and legal advisor in his Foreign Affairs Office, and is an asset for any one of these organs. If he will be elected, Dr. Adsett will be in charge with a lot of success all the tasks with a benefit for his organization and to prepare the next General Assembly. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ambassador. And I see Panama.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I merely want to propose or second the proposal made by Mexico, not only because of the qualities that the ambassador has mentioned, but also because of the human assets that the ambassador has, that is going to perform a very important role, and I beg you to approve by acclamation.
The ambassador of Peru asks for the floor. No.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. It was just to second the proposal that the distinguished delegate of Panama has made. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So we all heard the applause, and I want to congratulate the new chair of the CAJP, Ambassador Hugh Adsett, and I think his term starts right now. So, sir, thank you for offering yourself, and congratulations to you. And yes, I give you the floor, but not for the CAJP meeting.
Well, since you offered me the floor, I'll be very brief, but I wanted very much to thank Ambassador Baños, Ambassador Rocaber, and Ambassador Forsyth, indeed, for the nominations and for the very kind words as well. But also, let me take a really quick opportunity to thank Ambassador Rocaber for her leadership of the committee and her commitment to getting us to and through the General Assembly a few months ago. That was really important. You played a critical role, and I think if I can contribute anything, it'll be simply to be able to build a little tiny bit on the base that you have so well prepared over the course of the past year. So thank you very much for that. And colleagues, I'm at your disposal, and I'm looking forward to having a chance to work with you all in the months ahead. Thank you.
I recognize the Ambassador of Honduras.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yes, we can. Honduras. In the welcome of the proposal of the ambassador being approved by acclamation. Thank you.
Okay, this concludes item number 3, and we proceed now to item number 4. On the agenda, we have a long agenda, but we're making progress, and that's the elections for the vacant positions of governmental experts in the working group to examine the national reports envisioned in the Protocol of San Salvador. There was a note from the Secretary General, CP/INF 9533/22. As reflected in the document, there are 3 vacancies for government experts of the working group to examine the national reports envisioned in the Protocol of San Salvador, whose term expired on October 23rd of this year. And 3 candidacies were received by the deadline of November 16. And these candidacies were from Ms. Johanna del Pilar Cortés from Colombia, Mr. Santiago Guayasamín from Ecuador, and Mr. Juan Pablo Delgado from Mexico. Let us keep in mind that the Secretary General has the authority to appoint the independent experts of the group. Therefore, in session of the Permanent Council, we shall focus only on the election of the governmental experts. If there are no objections and having 3 candidacies for 3 vacancies, the Chair suggests that we proceed to these elections by acclamation. Is that supported? Thank you. We all heard the applause from the members of the Council, and we therefore register that the Permanent Council has elected by acclamation the following as governmental experts in the working group to examine the national reports envisioned in the Protocol of San Salvador. And these are, again, the candidates of Colombia, Ecuador, and Mexico, respectively, Ms. Johanna del Pilar Cortés, Mr. Santiago Guayasamín, and Mr. Juan Pablo Delgado. On behalf of the Permanent Council, I extend congratulations to the new governmental experts of this working group. And we continue with item 5 on the agenda, and that has to do with consideration and adoption of 2 draft resolutions at request of the chair of the CAP. And this was included in document CP/INF 9545/22. Again, this was done at the request of Minister Orimar Jacobinho de Barros Nunez, alternate representative of Brazil to the OAS. And according to the text of said document, at its meeting held on November 18, the CAP considered these matters and agreed upon the draft resolutions, which were distributed as documents CP/CAP 3864/22 Ref 1 and CP/CAP 3869/22, and decided to submit them to the Permanent Council with CAP's recommendation to approve them. Let us then first proceed with approval of the draft resolution titled Authorization to Use Resources from the Indirect Cost Recovery Reserve Subfund to finance the extension of projects for mandate prioritization and development of the strategic plan of the organization for 2023 through 2025. And this was contained, as I mentioned earlier, in a document CP/CAP 3864/22 Ref 1. The Chair has been informed that the CAP has full agreement on the text of this draft resolution. In this regard, if there are no objections, and I look around if there are any objections, if not, then it is approved. Let us now proceed with approval of the draft resolution titled Transfers Between Chapters of the Program Budget to Cover Additional Costs for Personal Cost Adjustments, CP/CAP 3869/22, as presented by the Chair of the Committee on Administrative and Budgetary Affairs. I have been informed that in respect of this draft resolution, the CAP also agreed fully on this resolution. And again, if there are no objections, then we also approve this resolution. Thank you. We now move to item 6 on the agenda, and if we go at this pace, we'll be finished by 12, I think. This is consideration and adoption of the draft resolution, place and date of the 53rd regular session of the General Assembly. For this agenda item, the Chair of the Permanent Council has prepared and distributed the draft resolution contained in document CP/Doc 5831/22, which was distributed already. I would like to ask delegations if we are able to approve this draft resolution, and I give the floor to those who want to speak out on this resolution or who want to support it. Anyone? No? It means that we have full approval of this. Okay. Thank you very much, and this is approved. We are moving quite fast, and you had not expected that, but it's up to all of you. And so those who were worried that we wouldn't get to their items are now fully satisfied. And in fact, we are moving too early, I think, because there's a request from Canada to move the next item, commemoration of Human Rights Day, to 12 o'clock. So in an hour. That means that we will now continue to the item, the commemoration of the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. This agenda item has been included in today's order of business at the request of the Permanent Mission of Brazil on behalf of the OAS Group of Friends of Persons with Disabilities. And that was contained in document CP/INF 9547/22. The Permanent Mission of Brazil has also shared with all of us the text of the statement through document CP/INF 9553/22. So for the consideration of this agenda item, we will first have a reading of a statement on behalf of the group of Friends of Persons with Disabilities by the Permanent Representative of Brazil, His Excellency Ambassador Otávio Brandelli. Ambassador Brandelli, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. The group of friendly countries from the people of the American states associates itself to all the commemorations of the Day of People with Disabilities that was instituted by the General Assembly of the United Nations, which said that solutions for the people, for their development, the role of innovations, and in an equitable manner. It is very important to remember this date because it tries to promote the rights of the people with disabilities in all ranges of society, as well as all the aspects in their lives. The pandemic of COVID-19 affected in a disproportionate manner the people with disability, raising barriers for them and to adapt themselves to be able to access healthcare systems. That is why we want to recall that the work of the right and the dignity of the people with disabilities 2016-2019 considers that all these people with disabilities must be, their needs have to be taken into account before and after the problem, with the means as well as technical assistance in order to safeguard their autonomy, their movement, deployment, and independence. We consider about all the provisions of this in all ranges of society as the beneficiaries of changes that may accelerate the progress of an inclusive way, promoting societies that are resilient for all people involved, avoiding disaster risk and humanitarian relief. Talking about the member countries of the OAS in the protection of the people with disabilities, we appeal to all of you to give support and to give a considerable way against all type of discrimination. In the same way, we also pinpoint the need that the member states assess, evaluate all policies that are inclusive, that protect the exercise of the rights of the people with disabilities so that they get good and correct programs, plans, etc., that will allow them and stress and enforce, enhance their rights in the Inter-American Agreement in order to fight against all type of discrimination against people with disabilities in the United Nations and depending on the situation itself. The member states are going to give the support and follow up with all the decisions of the human rights that must be protected for the people with disabilities. 3 years after it was created, the group of friendly countries to the people with disabilities urge the other members to join the group. We also congratulate for the eliminations or any type of discrimination against people of disabilities, as well as the equity and group of the OAS that after the third cycle in 2021, due to the synergies that were adopted and achieved jointly with civil society, adding possibilities of learning the situation of the people of disabilities in our continent and to detect the most urgent needs, and committed with the full inclusion of people with disabilities in these new technologies. We consider that working jointly, we have to strengthen all the services, the group follow-up, DOPADE, and the Department of Inclusion of the OAS of the Hemispheric Plan. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
And we receive the remarks by the following 4 invited guests, who will each have a maximum of 5 minutes. First, I would like to welcome to the OAS Permanent Council and give the floor to remarks by Ms. Iris Gonzalez de Valenzuela, Chair of the Committee for the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Persons with Disabilities. You have the floor, Chair of the...
Thank you very much, Chair. Hello to everyone in the Permanent Council and other colleagues. I am honored to speak to the members of the Permanent Council of this multilateral organization on behalf of the Committee to Eliminate All Forms of Discrimination Against Persons with Disability. As part of the commemoration of the International Day of Persons with Disabilities, transformational solutions for inclusive development, the role of innovation to promote an accessible, equitable world. That is our slogan for this year. This year marks the 30th anniversary that we have been making this day more visible, with a view to promoting a change in attitudes and taking into account the realities of this population. Specifically, it is important to remember that to have an effective approach in this area, given the different geographic, social, economic, and political contexts, it is important to understand the situation of persons with disabilities. In that sense, it is necessary to have disaggregated data in order to carry out public policies and coordinate activities to address various situations in member states. This is the reason that for our Secretariat, we are pleased to present today the Observatory on Disability. This is a project that we have been working to establish. We have been working to consolidate the reports presented by states parties during the third cycle of monitoring of the convention, so that we can have a tool, a very important tool, that will help us systematize the data that we have for all cycles that have been evaluated. The goal is to promote research with the necessary scientific rigor so that they can inform public policies and laws, as the case may be. We trust that using the outcomes of this process, we will be able to promote international cooperation that is evidence-based and thereby enable countries to learn from experiences in other countries and enter into strategic agreements and partnerships and enhancing knowledge in the various areas to have greater impact. The goal is also to improve management by countries and regions in the hemisphere. This mechanism is becoming a benchmark for other instruments that address the situation of persons of disabilities. This strengthens our leadership. Citizens are increasingly asking for transparency, governance, and trust in our region. I would like to thank the Saraki Foundation and the Department of Social Inclusion of the Secretariat of Access to Rights and Equity of the OAS for helping to coordinate this project. I would also like to thank all of the stakeholders that have been involved and have allowed us today to present this important platform. We are grateful for the commitment of the OAS to the well-being of our communities at a time of significant change that require governments to improve efficiency and be more empathetic. This platform will provide benefits to our peoples as it will provide leadership and ensure that no one is left behind. Joining words to deeds is what will allow citizen participation to become a reality. We can't do anything together if we do not act together. We are grateful for all the support that has been provided, and thank you again for allowing us to speak today at this forum. Thank you very much for your attention. Have a great day.
Thank you, Ms. Iris Gonzalez de Valenzuela, Chair of the SEDIS, for your presentation. Now the Chair would like to welcome the OAS Permanent Council and offer the floor to Ms. Maria Soledad Cisternas, Special Envoy of the United Nations Secretary General on Disability and Accessibility. You have the floor, Ms. Cisternas.
Muchas gracias, Presidente.
Thank you very much, Chair. This is 30 years after the resolution that created the International Day for Persons with Disabilities. We are taking stock of these 30 years since the convention was agreed to eliminate all forms of discrimination against persons with disabilities of the OAS. There is also the Convention of the United Nations on persons with disabilities. This has led to very important empowerment of persons with disabilities and their representative organizations. We saw this at the Summit on Disability that was held last April, where the governments of Norway, Ghana, and other international organizations led this activity, which led to over 1,200 commitments, many of which came from the member states. The convention was ratified, and then there is also the protocol that was ratified. We have a monitoring mechanism for the international and regional levels. There is effective oversight of what is going on involving persons with disabilities. Persons with disabilities also had to deal with the challenge of COVID-19. We had to fight to ensure that all persons with disabilities received equal care, especially in ICUs, the use of ventilators rather. There were countries outside of our region where persons with disabilities were at the bottom of the list for the care that they needed. We have been able to place value upon all lives. There are no lives that are more important than others. We also work to ensure that persons with disabilities were able to receive the support that they needed when they had to quarantine, as well as access to food distribution, in addition to psychological support and education. Very often persons with disabilities are left behind in those areas. Monitoring mechanisms are extremely important when it comes to underscoring the many difficulties that we have faced in carrying some of these measures forward. As we undertake this stock taking and we look at the UN 2030 agenda on sustainable development, we have seen that 5 of the Sustainable Development Goals have targets that specifically talk about persons with disabilities. There are 2 goals that have indicators related to disability. I think that this is very good news, but it is important to address challenges. What challenges are countries facing in our region? Most countries have ratified the UN Convention and the OAS Convention. The recognition of the importance of this issue and the importance of persons with disabilities is extremely important. There's also the right to free and informed consent so that persons can make decisions for themselves. There is also the right to live independently and be included in the community. Individuals have the right to decide with whom they live. We need to break with models that promote putting people in institutions. There are guidelines in that direction. This issue requires much more intensive work, especially with community services that are available for persons with disabilities, as well as residential or at-home services. Universal access is a tremendous challenge, especially when we're talking about AI, which cannot be an intelligent technology if it is not available to persons with disabilities. Freedom and security of individuals is also part of this, as is employment and inclusive education. These are some of the outstanding challenges that we have to address. And we need to make sure that what we adopt is binding. To conclude, we need to still focus on promoting rights. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cisternas, for that great overview. And I now would like to welcome to the OAS Permanent Council, Mr. Raul Montiel, Executive Director of the Fundación Saraki. You have the floor, Mr. Montiel.
¿Qué tal? Buenos días, muchas gracias por la oportunidad.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. I would like to thank the OAS for their involvement in the process of creating the software that I'll be presenting today. This software has been developed as part of an initiative that my foundation has been implementing in countries in Latin America with support from various entities. The objective of this project is to improve opportunities for social and economic inclusion for persons with disabilities. We are making information available that they need for inclusion. We made a proposal to the OAS to create a software platform that has two main features. One, the observatory. This observatory is going to be like a database that will collect information from all of the country reports that were presented during the first few reporting periods for implementation of the OAS Convention, as well as recommendations that have been issued by countries. All of this information was received in a Word file at the time, but now we are migrating it to the database so that others can access the information much more quickly. The second function of the software is the feature for reports. When OAS member states submit their reports next year, they can submit it via the platform in a much more quick and accessible way. This will make the information available in real time in the database. This software has been developed, and we are in the midst of migrating information from the previous reports. Starting in 2023, the reports will be uploaded in real time because the countries can do this directly in the platform themselves. This software provides added value to countries because they can upload their reports much more quickly and they can share information in real time. This will also make it easier to manage this information. And it will help persons with disabilities and their families because they also will have access to a tremendous amount of information, because the reports are published online. In the past, it was more difficult to find these reports, even though they were published online, but sometimes you had to know the right keywords to look for in Google and to then find the specific country or the specific period of time. And now we have all that information centralized. This software is also compatible with the database of the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. We are also working with the UN to make sure that there is this compatibility. We are very grateful to the OAS for this initiative and its leadership regarding this software, which will start to be used in 2023. There is another important group that is going to benefit from this software. And those are individuals working on human rights issues at the OAS. These reports will be accessible. The reports will be available to people at the OAS and to other international organizations. once this is all in place, everyone will benefit because we'll be able to access information that is difficult to find now. This is important because we need to address the issue of intersectionality of these different groups. In all of the conventions, there are cross-cutting intersectional issues. Persons with disabilities are mentioned in the Convention on Women, in the Convention on Children, and we need to make sure that we have access to this cross-cutting information. That's what the database will do. If there's time, I do have a video. If the technicians would help me show it to you, it's just 2 minutes long. Thank you.
La presentación de informes es un proceso muy importante para evaluar el avance.
Presenting reports is very important to evaluate the commitments of states parties. This is why we have the reporting platform. This is available during the entire reporting cycle. It has two components, the reporting platform and the observatory. First, each state party, civil society organization has access to the database of official reports and other types of reports. There is an administrator that allows you to configure the report and access data in real time. After verification, all of the information is available through the observatory. It is available to all interested parties. Data can be consulted by country, by indicator, or by theme, as needed. To make this operational, the data for the second and third cycles will be available for each state party. Using the platform, we can optimize the process of verifying reports from each state party to the convention.
Okay, that was the contribution by Mr. Raul Montiel. Thank you very much for that. Also for the video, which illustrates how the software works or will work. We have a fourth speaker, but when we get the connection right, she will come on. In the meantime, we open the floor for remarks by representatives of member states. So those who want to speak, please. I see Barbados.
Mr. President, Secretary General, Assistant Secretary General, Excellencies, colleagues, let me begin by stating that I speak today on behalf of Barbados, but I'm sure that my remarks will be endorsed by the other members of the CARICOM grouping. Any discussion or debate on the theme of persons with disabilities, Mr. President, is essentially a human rights discussion and a human rights debate. Furthermore, any action in this regard must be a about what our societies can do to assist those that can't readily assist themselves in a manner that able-bodied persons daily take for granted. Interestingly, as I prepared for today's important discourse, I came across a definition of human rights, and it stated that human rights are afforded to all simply because we exist as human beings. It spoke of the universal rights that are available to all. It went on to specifically name those universal rights as inherent to all, regardless of nationality, sex, ethnic origin, color, religion, language, even sexual orientation. Nothing was stated about persons with disabilities. That fact stated, whilst we have witnessed much being done in the hemisphere for a diverse number of vulnerable groups in our societies, the one set that may not have been afforded their deserved level of attention and action may be those persons amongst us, that are differently abled. Since 1990, with the passing of the Americans with Disabilities Act, the U.S. government took a giant step in seeking to look out for this very vulnerable group. The legislation, which in many ways could and should serve many jurisdictions in this hemisphere as a worthy template for putting in statute their own policy desires as it relates to creating a more accommodating, social and economically viable environment for those persons with disabilities, is the example that we should use. The broad basis and theme for the tabling such as legislation, beyond the broad human rights theme, is the concept of full participation for persons with disabilities. This principle must also be the platform on which all policy direction is constructed. The concepts of equal opportunity, independent living, and economic self-sufficiency must be the basis on which all the other actions in this regard should be founded. The law also prohibits discrimination on the basis of disabilities. This is in terms of public accommodations, employment, transportation, and community living. These areas define the base environment in which persons with disabilities struggle every day. Establishing those notions and observations in statute is simply not enough. There's much more to be done to ensure that these laws are not just observed in the breach, but that the more able-bodied amongst us are sensitive to the barriers that persons with disabilities face daily, and that we respect and observe their needs as we go about our own daily activities. The fact is, Mr. President, that differently able people still face huge barriers of full participation in many aspects of their daily lives. It is our position that administrations in the Americas must find a way to combine efforts that lead the globe in combining the efforts of government, civil society, and experts in the field to constantly, one, discuss the issues that relate to disabilities and the full position of inclusive democracy, not just in the Americas, but leading the globe in what has become a global challenge and a democratic imperative. Every jurisdiction in the Americas must, as a matter of urgency and as a democratic imperative, grounded in human rights requirements, appoint a government special advisor on disability rights. Government administrations in the hemisphere that boast of being the freest and the most democratic must create comprehensive strategies to promote and protect the rights of persons with disabilities. Fundamental to this action and in the wider scope of ensuring that democracy has advanced must be action to increase access to democracy for voters with disabilities. And this is an issue that is right before us. The right to vote in a democratic election is a right that able-bodied persons take for granted. Persons with disabilities must have the right to vote independently and privately. It is also important that there be a commitment to expand access and inclusion for disabled persons. Simply stated, this hemisphere must become more inclusive, equitable, and accessible. The basics must be a true commitment to creating a hemisphere against all types of discrimination. That seeks to create an environment that foments economic self-sufficiency, independent living, affordable housing, and full access to all state services. It should be obvious to all that those who suffered most during the period when the pandemic COVID-19 was raging were the most vulnerable people in our communities. Able-bodied persons were treated to some of the same exclusions that persons with disabilities experience every day. Exclusion from services both at the private and the state level was the norm. It is therefore imperative that we do all in our administrative power to ensure that any rights of persons with disabilities that were violated or compromised during the pandemic be restored. It is also critical that government administrations function in a watchdog-like capacity to ensure that these rights are maintained. It is not enough to just make statements and appoint individuals. The development of comprehensive health systems that include the provision of rights for the disabled is critical to the advancement of our societies. Helping individuals cope with challenges posed by COVID is essential, and those posed by climate change is also critical. Climate planning for societies, including the disabled, must be a part of this policy. Mr. Chairman, there has been an agreement reached at the level of CARICOM for a disabilities bill and a charter. In Barbados, there is a bill that has been drafted and is now available for public comment. The preamble states an act that provides certain rights to persons with disabilities, to provide for the promotion and protection and full and equal enjoyment of the rights, to facilitate the enforcement of those rights, to eliminate discrimination on the basis of disability, to provide welfare and rehabilitation of persons with disabilities, to provide for the registration of persons with disabilities, and to establish a national commission on disabilities and for the connected purposes. I encourage all states, Mr. Chairman, those who have not done it before, to ensure that you look out for the rights in law of those persons with disabilities in your society. I'm obliged to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. And I give the floor to Colombia.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the group of friends of persons with disabilities for including this item on the agenda today. We cannot let this date go by without recalling those who need access to rights and equity. We are working to promote peace and life, which is why we are working on inclusion of all citizens, including persons with disabilities. Under our law, persons with disabilities benefit from special constitutional protections. There are specific standards to promote the rights of this population. We welcome the initiative of the group of friends, and Colombia is interested in supporting you as a member, and I would like this request to be considered. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I give the floor to the Ambassador of Peace.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and representatives. In addition to the declaration of the countries, friend countries, we have also adopted and made public that we have also had the honor of hearing the presentation of the different panelists, to which we thank for the valuable time in giving the attention to all the conventions and the talks about this matter. What is important for the groups of the hemisphere and as well as the friendly countries is to recover this date that was instituted in 1992. First of all, because the people with disabilities are those who occupy one of the most positions that lag behind more than anybody else. Before the pandemic, there were deficiencies, and after it, the numbers show that the unfair situation has only worsened. We would like the people, for the children who are at school and who cannot go to school sometimes, are exactly those that have disabilities, and the people with one with disabilities are the ones that face some more problems. They do not even enjoy the civil rights, or in the communities, it is the families of the people with disabilities that suffer the role of the states in looking for a position that is at least acceptable. Second, there's a lack of consciousness, that awareness that people with disabilities have the rights, and it is a negative way of seeing where the people believe that, look at the people with disabilities, we do not have a right. Being more specific about this, there is a capacitist way that they live in according to their abilities, and this it is a normal thing, and they are subjects of the law. There is nothing further away from the concept of human rights, because they have their rights too. A few days ago, Ms. Francisco, during the celebration of the people with the disability, said, and I say it correctly, one has to make the church accessible, and it is extremely important to offer this. You have to have the ramps, you have to interpret this. It is not sufficient for a person with disabilities feels that they are respected in their rights, and to include them with a slogan, and to guarantee that the people with disabilities are really gathered, integrated, acknowledged, supported as members with full rights in the society. Mr. Chair, that is why the group of countries friendly with the people with disabilities says that with the International Day of People with Disabilities, and to extend the invitation to strengthen their work to all those member states that are still not members. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Sorry, before giving the floor to St. Lucia, I want to see if we can get a connection with Ms. Sarah Menkara, Special Advisor on International Disabilities Rights, Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor of the United States Department of State. Ms. Menkara, if you're there, you have the floor.
Yeah. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, hear you.
Beautiful, amazing. Hello, everyone, colleagues, friends. Good morning. Happy International Day of Persons with Disabilities. I'm honored to be with you all today. My name is Sarah Menkara, and I'm the U.S. Special Advisor on International Disability Rights. As we are celebrating this really important day on International Day of Persons with Disabilities, which was a few days ago, you know, we want to be able to bring forward the narrative that the inclusion of persons with disabilities brings value to our society at large. And this is why this worldview as special advisor was established under President Obama in our State Department, showcasing that when we're talking about national security, peace, and prosperity, we need to also be including disability policy into our efforts. So I'm honored to have been appointed by President Biden. And when starting last year, one of the things that we really pushed forward is the value-based narrative. When we talk about the inclusion of persons with disabilities, at times we really stop at this perspective that it's a human rights issue. It's the right thing to do. But I wanted to take a step forward and say that when we include persons with disability, it brings value to our society. When we exclude and marginalize persons with disability, we're losing out on their value, their innovation, and what they bring forward. Our office covers the globe. We travel all over, including Latin America. And in doing so, we focus on four main priorities. One is fostering accountability and building capacity. How do we support countries and governments, civil societies, and building capacity when it comes to disability policy legislations and laws? Number two is promoting disability inclusive democracy. It's not enough for persons with disability to have access of voting, but we need to make sure persons with disabilities are able to politically participate across the board. Their voices are heard, and not just on disability-related issues, but across all issues within the system that we're in. Number 3 is advancing the human rights of persons with disabilities during moments of crisis. We've all experienced COVID. Climate change is a reality for a lot of us, and conflict in many spaces. How do we make sure persons with disabilities are not left behind? Because in many spaces we are left behind. But how do we also see them as a source of value and solution in those crisis moments? And the 4th priority, which is something I mentioned earlier, is how do we disrupt the narrative surrounding disability? How do we make sure that when we look at disability inclusion, we're looking at it from a value-based lens? How we do that is 3 main important elements. Number 1 is we need to have further difficult conversations. A lot of times we end up having conversations that are very much, scratching the surface or not asking the question, why is this the reality of persons with disabilities? Number 2 is we need to really be able to create shared responsibility, because I think all of us can relate to this. A lot of time disability inclusion and policy falls all the way on the shoulders of disability-related issues. How do we have everyone in the system be thinking about disability as part of their own work and efforts? And number 3 is then how do we build capacity and implementation? I want to end with, there's a common phrase in the disability world, nothing about us without us, right? Which is important. But I want to take it a step further, and I want to say nothing without us. We need to be across in all kinds of spaces, whether we're talking about climate change, whether we're talking about AI, whether we're talking about COVID, women and gender equality, whether we're talking about infrastructure and reconstruction, we need to be at the table. Because not only are we individuals with value and potential, we bring innovation and we bring a lot of perspective. Thank you so much for this amazing day, and looking forward to further interventions.
Thank you, Ms. Minkara, for your presentation and getting us more fine-tuned to this issue. I now give the floor to the Ambassador of St. Lucia.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, colleagues. My delegation expresses appreciation to the delegations of Brazil and the member states of the Group of Friends of Persons with Disabilities for presenting this item for the PC's attention today. Chair, in the interest of time, I will be brief. The government of St. Lucia has placed the interest of persons with disabilities on its agenda. We are one of 4 CARICOM states to be signatory to the Marrakesh Treaty, which was adopted in 2013 to create a set of mandatory limitations and exceptions for the benefit of the blind, visually impaired, and otherwise print disabled. We are currently in the process of putting measures in place to implement this treaty, as well as the Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, into domestic law. In 2021, the government was able to provide certificate training to over 100 educators of children with autism, ADHD, and dyslexia. The president of the National Council for Persons with Disabilities of St. Lucia and member of the National Coordinating Committee for Human Rights has been instrumental in the implementation of policies in keeping with the Convention of Rights of Persons with Disabilities to improve the standard of living of differently abled persons in St. Lucia. The president of the Council was part of St. Lucia's delegation at the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting held in June 2022 in Rwanda. His participation further reaffirms my government's commitment to the advancement of disability affairs. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ambassador. We also had some background music at some point. I give the floor now to the Ambassador of Canada.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. C'est juste, je voudrais ajouter quelques mots pour faciliter et remercier la délégation de Brésil.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank Brazil for facilitating this very important initiative and for his leadership in the group of friends. The topic for this year is inclusive development. It recognizes the importance of the role of persons with disabilities in order to create a more inclusive, equitable, and accessible world for all. This year, Canada supported the election of Dr. Laverne Jacobs to the Committee of the UN on Persons with Disabilities, and he is the first Canadian to be member of this committee. Our colleague from Barbados stated that once we recognize the obstacles that people with disabilities face, it is important to continue to question our approaches to promote inclusion for persons with disabilities, with the goal to promote the rights of persons with disabilities internationally. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ambassador of Canada, and I give the floor to Chile.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Chile would like to thank the leadership of Brazil in all of these matters that were taken on decision. We thank especially the General Secretary of the United Nations on the Capacity and Disability, Maria Soledad Cisternas. That is why we reaffirm our commitment to the right to equal opportunities for people with disabilities, as well as of human right, not as favors, as Maria Soledad said. That is why that we want to avoid and eliminate any type of discrimination. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And now, last but not least, we give the floor to the Holy See.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. Secretario General.
Very much, Mr. Chair, General Secretary, and distinguished representative. This delegation of the Holy See thanks this session of the Permanent Council has included the commemoration of the International Day of Persons with a Disability. Faced with this truth and fact that faces so many people, we would like to show here and share the message for the Holy Father due to this commemoration. And I thank also the representative of Peru who took or who had the kindness during his presentation to refer to the Holy Father. First of all, the Pope remembers the suffering of all women with disabilities in places where there is a war going on. The Holy See, faced by the International Day of the Elimination of Violence Against Women that will be dealt and discussed with later on in this meeting, wants to reaffirm its contribution so that each and every single woman is respected, that their suffering is heard and taken into account by all. Taking this into account, the Holy Father says that any type of condition of disability, be it temporary, acquired, or permanent, does not change our nature, that we are children of the Father, nor changes our dignity. But the fragility of human being takes a full knowledge and changes our reality so that they become more inclusive, more human, and more welcoming. In order to create this inclusion culture, one has to have different type of attitudes in these relationships. We should guarantee that the people with disability will have more and more access to buildings and to meeting places, to facilitate their language and to overcome all type of barriers. The Holy See requests that the international organizations such as the OAS may favor every time more and more that society will see people with disabilities a possibility of enriching life, because they do not arise by chance, but they have the same roots in common, that the life of the people with disabilities is less worthy than the others. So we want to break down the barriers against discrimination so that disability is not a division but a reason for welcoming and kindness. Mr. Chair, the Holy See ensures once again its full commitment through all its institutions and works for all people with special needs, defending their dignity and promoting its aspirations so that they may have a full life in society. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And this concludes this item. I think we have heard some very interesting contributions, and all of these presentations and comments will be taken note of, and we will get them back to you through the minutes, I think. If there are no objections, then it is so agreed. I think we still have to wait a little bit for the next item on commemoration of Human Rights Day, and what I'll do, I'll continue with item 10, which is an update of the chair on the steps taken by the working group established by resolution CP/RAS 1210, authorization of an external firm to investigate allegations concerning the Secretary General. And I will just tell you what we have done in the past weeks. The Permanent Council adopted the resolution to contract the external firm on the 11th of November. The working group to do the job consists of the chair and vice chair of the Permanent Council and the Secretary for Administration and Finances. This working group met on the 17th of November. Since the Secretary for Administration and Finance was on leave, we worked with his team and made sure that he was involved and approved everything we decided. We had a thorough discussion on the 17th about what needed to be done and agreed on a timeline. We decided on a public bidding process, and the Secretariat for Administration and Finance worked on the necessary documents. They presented these documents to the working group in a meeting on November the 28th, and we finalized these documents together. In total, there were 6 documents. These documents were published the same day on 3 websites, and so far I think we have 6 companies who have shown interest in doing the job. We gave potential bidders room for questions until the 2nd of December. We reviewed their questions and have posted the response to bidders yesterday, December 6th. Companies have to submit final bids by December the 9th. After that, the working group will review the bids from the 12th through the 14th of December. For that purpose, an evaluation matrix has been made. In the end, the report will be made with a selection of the companies. Bidders will be notified by December the 15th. The contract should be signed by December the 23rd. At least we hope so. So what we have done so far is to try to conclude the contract before the end of December, because in January there will be a new chair and vice chair for the PC, and then they don't have to deal with this part of the job. The company which will be selected and contracted will have, I think, 3 months to do its work and submit a report. This is the presentation of what we have done so far. If there are no other delegations wishing to make any intervention or asking questions, then this is so agreed. Thank you. I think we can continue with item 11 on the agenda. And this is the adoption of the following minutes. CP/ACTA 2365/22. Minutes of the special meeting of the Permanent Council of February 25 of this year. CP/ACTA 2367/22, the minutes of the special meeting of the Permanent Council of March 9 this year. CP/ACTA 2368/22, minutes of the special meeting of the Permanent Council of March 10 this year. 4. The CP/ACTA 2369/22, minutes of the regular meeting of the Permanent Council of March 23. Then we have the minutes of the special meeting of the Permanent Council of March 25 this year. That is documented in CP/ACTA 2370/22. Furthermore, minutes of the special meeting of the Permanent Council of May 13 of this year in CP/ACTA 2376/22. And finally, the minutes of the special meeting of the Permanent Council of May 13, which was documented in CP/ACTA 2377/22. If there are no comments, we will proceed to adopt all these minutes. No comments, thank you, and they are approved. So we will now go back to item 7. I hope that everybody is ready there. And that has to do with the commemoration of Human Rights Day. And that day is December the 10th. Let us proceed with this item. This agenda item has been included in today's order of business at the request of the delegations of Argentina, Canada, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, the Dominican Republic, Ecuador, Mexico, Panama, Peru, St. Lucia, the United States, and Uruguay, as per notes received from the United States in document CP/INF 9538/22 and Uruguay document CP/INF 9538/22, Addendum 1. For the consideration of this agenda item, we will now receive the presentations by the following 3 invited guests who will each have a maximum of 5 minutes to deliver a presentation. First, I would like to welcome the OAS to the OAS Permanent Council, Professor Catherine Sikkink, Ryan Family Professor of Human Rights Policy at the Harvard Kennedy School. You have the floor, Professor Sikkink.
Professor Josquin, could you please request the floor? The blue button at your bottom right. Thank you.
I believe I have some slides that are going to be shown together with my talk.
Great. So first, I want to thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you very briefly today to members of the Permanent Council. Next slide, please. And we're speaking to celebrate Human Rights Day. We're speaking to celebrate the American Declaration of Human Rights. This is the photo we have all seen before, and it rightfully celebrates the important contributions that Eleanor Roosevelt made to drafting the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Next slide, please. But this is a photo we don't see as much, which is the photo of one of the other 5 most important people who drafted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Hernan Santa Cruz, a Chilean diplomat who worked closely with Eleanor Roosevelt, with John Humphrey of Canada as well. And in particular, Hernan Santa Cruz was really responsible for making sure that economic, social, and cultural rights were there in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights alongside of civil and political rights. Next slide, please. But another thing we don't hear enough, maybe all of you know it, but I always stress it in every talk I give, that the American Declaration of Rights and Duties of Man was the earliest intergovernmental declaration of human rights. It predated by a full 8 months the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and that wasn't just an accident of who got there first. The first draft of the declaration, the Declaración Americana, was produced by the Inter-American Juridical Committee in March 1946 and circulated at that point to all member states. And it's a very instructive document, 50-page, very thoughtful, detailed, instructive document, a full year, more than a year before the first draft of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was available. And so the contributions of the American Declaration are important and often misunderstood or not ignored. And the diplomats from the Americas then went on to be very involved in the drafting of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and made sure that all the rights that were in the American Declaration, and almost all the rights, later went into the Universal Declaration. Now today, next slide please, I wanted to talk only about one of these rights that was in the American Declaration, which was drafted here at the 9th International Conference of American States. Next slide, please. And that is, I want to talk about a legacy of the American Declaration, the right to justice. And that is Article 18 of the American Declaration. And I put the article here both in Spanish and in English because I really think that reading the Spanish, we understand the origins of this article, right? That there needs to be un procedimiento sencillo y breve por el cual la justicia lo ampare contra actos de la autoridad. Okay, so this que lo ampare, I think makes us realize, and from my research, I believe that the origins of this come from the writ of amparo that is in many Latin American legal systems. Sometimes it's called tutela, sometimes it's called recurso de protección, sometimes it's called mandado de seguranza. But at least 15 Latin American legal systems have this amparo writ, and it was an important source for the right to justice in the Declaración Americana. Okay. Then the right to justice goes into the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, that's Article 8, and eventually goes into the American Convention on Human Rights as well. And I think that this is one explanation for why the inter-American human rights system has been so rightfully taken important global leadership on the right to justice. So we know that there's been path-breaking jurisprudence in the Inter-American Court, path-breaking for the world. It was more was done by the Inter-American Court on this issue of accountability and the right to justice, even than the European Court of Human Rights. And Latin American states have been genuine leaders as well in having accountability through transitional justice for past human rights violations. So I have a large research project, funding some funding now from the National Science Foundation and now the Canadian government, that has allowed us to create a database of all transitional justice policies all over the world. That is all domestic and international human rights prosecutions, reparations policies, and truth commissions. And we have found that the Americas have been leaders in transitional justice. Some countries like Argentina and Chile have had more human rights prosecutions, have had more accountability for past human rights than any other countries in the world. Other countries like Colombia or Guatemala that are still in the midst of processes of accountability have nevertheless provided very innovative contributions to transitional justice. And so I want to just, I always like to remind people of that important role. And I want to end with just one short plea. With the next slide, please. Okay, this is the birthplace of the OAS and the American Declaration, the Gimnasio Moderno in Bogotá. Maybe some of you know it. I felt I was the only tourist who ever went there saying I'm doing tourism for the American Declaration. But this is where the conference delegates moved after the Bogotá, from central Bogotá to the Bogotazo started. As you see, there's not a plaque here outside. There's not a plaque inside either where I visited. And I think it would be a tribute, a genuine tribute to the importance, not just of the OAS, but also the importance, historical importance of the American Declaration, to have a plaque put on this building, because people may want to visit here to celebrate the birthplace of human rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Stipping, for your presentation. And we have a point of order from the Ambassador of Peru.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. Delegates, this is most likely going to be my last intervention at the Permanent Council. You don't know how much it pains me to have to say this to you here today. This is a very intense day, and we have come here to try to have a resolution for tomorrow, a resolution that values the excellent work of a high-level group of the ministers and vice ministers of foreign affairs. And on Monday in Lima, I attended a video conference with them where they approved the commitment to continue working to ensure governance in my country. A few minutes ago, I spoke with the ambassadors of Belize and Bolivia, and with my dear friend, the representative of the Dominican Republic. We spoke about how we could work together to move forward in tomorrow's Permanent Council session in order to have a resolution that will ratify the work of the high-level group and that will urge executive, legislative, and judiciary branches in Peru to undertake a dialogue towards a political truce that will ensure the future of the Peruvian people. The governance crisis in Peru is not anything new, but it has reemerged very intensely. But in any event, we have a way to move forward through this council, which will meet tomorrow. And Chair, you were kind enough to convene that session. We will continue to ratify this process at that time, promoting first and foremost the rule of law in a context of commitment to human rights. Within Human Rights Chair, the vote of the people is fundamental, as is respect for the Constitution. In this context, at this very moment, having a coffee and sharing this with friends, sharing this dream for the Americas, where there are more rights for more people. Just a few moments ago, we received the news where I learned that Pedro Castillo has closed the Congress of the Republic. He has dissolved the Congress of the Republic, obviously without having any legal power to do so. Therefore, we are seeing at least a technical breakdown of the constitutional order, which constitutes, naturally, a very serious violation of the constitutional process of democracy in Peru, but not only Peru, in all countries that are part of this organization. The members of the high-level group are committed to democracy, and this commitment to democracy is more important than ever, because today, more than ever, we need this organization of American states. And personally speaking, with myself and my team, we have dedicated so much time to this organization, which now has a major challenge to face. For moral and personal reasons and professional reasons, I cannot have any ties to a regime that operates in this way, to a regime under any circumstances that says there will eventually later be elections. I don't know on what type of legal basis, but I cannot have ties to a regime that rules by decree. Therefore, as the permanent representative of Peru to the OAS, this will be the last time I speak here. This is my last intervention. I thank you all for your commitment and your friendship. Long live democracy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. This is a new development, and we will deal with it tomorrow specifically, but we wish you all the best in the coming days, and we will follow this very closely. Thank you. We will follow with the commemoration of Human Rights Day, and I think that Uruguay has asked for the floor. Is it the point of...
No, Presidente.
Chair, I am not happy with surprises like this, especially surprises of this nature. I think that there is a need to express to Ambassador Forsyth all of our understanding, because what we have seen recently and the work that has been done to create a space for understanding and coordination and dialogue and political truce, which is what the high-level group has been working on and addressing. Therefore, It is difficult to know what to feel when something like this happens. But I think that we need to be clear and first remember the human side of things, which is to express our understanding to Ambassador Forsyth. That's first and foremost, because that's why we're here and we are friends. The second point is as important as the first, especially for institutions, given the seriousness of what he just told us, the seriousness of what he just informed us. Today we are dealing with different topics, all of which are important, but nothing is more important than what you just informed us of now. This is extremely serious, extremely concerning, and I must admit, I really hope that things are not as you say they are, because we are all aware of what that holds for the destiny of our region and the future of democracy. This is an absolutely fundamental and central issue. What you have just told us and what you are informing us of is extreme. So, dear friend, I do not have any idea how we are going to talk and think about this collectively, but we need to reflect upon this collectively and rapidly, and we need to do so all together, because that is why this organization exists. That is why the high-level working group exists. It has been doing this work so that a path forward can be found. And now we are faced with this extremely strange situation that is very difficult to understand. If you take anything away from what I'm saying, it's that this has a tremendous impact on me. Not only an impact, but it hurts me. It hurts the Americas, because the Americas must uphold quality democracy. And that is what we are working so much to do. Thank you, Ambassador, and our understanding for what's going on in your country and with your people, as we would feel for all peoples of the Americas. Democracy, democracy, democracy. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador of Uruguay. We will take a break now and we will reconvene at 2:30. Thank you.